welcome Adam Hanlon to the show, everybody. Thanks for joining us, Adam. How's it going?
Hi, yeah, it's good, thank you. How are you guys?
We're great.
Doing good.
Good.
Adam's joining us from the UK. Thanks for getting up and staying up so late for us, Adam.
I think it's rather more thanks to you guys for getting up early, really. But yeah, whichever way around. It's nice to be here.
It's great to meet you too. Well, for our listeners, Adam, why don't you give everyone a brief intro and tell us about yourself? We'll start that way.
So I've been a diver for a very long time. I'm an underwater photographer, and I'm also the owner and the editor of WetPixel, which is a resource for underwater image makers on the internet, on the web. And so I sort of divide my time between taking pictures, certainly normal times, maybe I should say. I divide my time between taking pictures and then trying to help out people in the WetPixel community. So, yeah.
Well, we have talked on many episodes about WetPixel and how we're huge fans, and we try to tell everyone about it because it's a community that both Dalton and I grew up on and loved. And we'll definitely get into the history of WetPixel and all that other stuff too. But I don't want to get into that right away. Let's delve into a little bit of Adam at first. Let's talk about how did you even get started diving? Like, give us your background. I know you had mentioned you were born in South Africa, but now reside. So how long ago did you even start diving? What inspired you to even start getting into diving and then underwater photography?
So I think Cousteau was probably to blame, actually, originally. I mean, as a really young kid, Cousteau's programs were on TV, and I was fascinated by them. And I think that's where the seed was started. But then, I grew up in South Africa, and in those days, certainly this is in the 80s or 70s and 80s, you couldn't dive until you were 18. You had to be 18 years old. So I used to go spearfishing a lot, and I'd go and catch fish. And one of the places I went to where they're catching fish, the guys were scuba diving, well, quite often they were. And one of the guys just happened to say, "Do you want to try diving?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And he pretty much did. He pretty much said, "Don't hold your breath and remember to equalize a lot." So I did. And it was, I have to say, one of the weird things and I use this quite a lot when I'm talking to people about diving is I vividly remember being underwater. I vividly remember being underwater and breathing and thinking that was a bit odd because I wasn't used to breathing underwater. I don't actually remember what I saw, but I do remember it feeling really cool. So it was kind of like, this whole idea of breathing underwater, being underwater and breathing was really, really cool. And I wanted more of it. And that was late 83. So I went and did the cheapest scuba course I could find. We learned by our mistakes.
Yes, indeed.
And that was a CMAS course.
That's what I was wondering if it was CMAS.
Yeah, in 84. And then later on, I discovered actually that actually cheap wasn't a good idea, and actually learned how to dive properly with NAUI school, and I was an NAUI instructor in 1987 actually. So
nice.
So and then since that, I've worked lots of different agencies, but yeah, that was the beginnings of it. That was the start of it.
I knew I was in good company. I'm a NAUI instructor myself.
Yeah, so I did my NAUI ITC in Cape Town, and I don't know how well you know South Africa, but I'm from Natal, which is warm water, blue warm water, and we shifted down to Cape Town to this instructor exam, and I think it was probably a 5-mil wetsuit, and I spent the whole course completely frozen.
Freezing,
It was desperate. I think I was hypothermic through most of it. Anyway, it seemed to pass, so it's going to be that bad.
That sounds relatively familiar. Todd and I did rescue diver and an open water course here in California years ago. And it was similar. We rented a wetsuit that really didn't fit properly, and I think the water temp was probably better than it was there, but it was like probably 67 degrees, 66 degrees.
Yeah.
And, just like similarly to over there, for every 10 feet you go down, you lose a degree of temperature. So by the time we were doing our skills at 40 feet, you know, it's like 62 or 60.
Yeah.
It gets chilly quick.
So
yeah, no, it was cool. I mean, I have to say I've subsequently discovered dry suits, and I don't really have. Well, I still have a problem with the cold, but I've learned how to deal with it. But that was it was tough at the time.
now that you're in dry suits, you're probably never going back unless it's over, unless it doesn't require a 1 mil or something or something.
Well, yeah, I kind of like that. I kind of, I do own a 5 mil somewhere, but I very rarely wear it. You know, if I need a 5 mil, I wear a dry suit.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
The days of us putting on a 7 mil are gone, man.
Yeah,
That's
I
for
feel
sure.
like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in one of those.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how did you, when did you first pick up a camera or get the inkling that you might want to try underwater photography, Adam?
So going back to again, actually very similar timing. The guys that I did the NAUI research course through, and I did my NAUI training through, the instructor that kind of basically almost kind of took me under his wing. It was an underwater photographer, and that's where it all started. And I bought so again late '87. I bought a Nikon S5 and shot with that for quite a few years. And that I had various other things along the way, but CNC motor marines, various other bits and pieces. But yeah, you know, that was the start of it. So and ironically, and it shows you what a change it was. So in the late '80s in South Africa, I basically knew everyone who was taking pictures underwater because there was about 7 or 8 of us, you know, and that was it. And it just shows you how times have changed, where pretty much everyone takes pictures underwater now.
Yeah.
But at the time, you know, and particularly in South Africa, which wasn't the center of the universe, so you know, and it was expensive. And there you go, very cool.
There we go.
There's the chap, and that's the right color one too. The green ones aren't as cool. So yeah, I had one of those as well. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and so I went through all the stuff with film. You know, I used to shoot slide film because I did used to sell images and stuff. So I would. You know, you'd send them all off. I'd go on a trip somewhere and you'd shoot 20 rolls of film or whatever, send them all off to be processed as slide film to South Africa. And it all come back 6 weeks later, and they were all underexposed, overexposed, out of focus. You know, and you'd chuck them all away, and you'd go again. It was, you know, I went through it all like everybody else did.
I mean, just for those of us, at least from an underwater perspective, that didn't grow up having to shoot film while underwater, much less slide film, right? It's like there's no latitude to get your settings wrong. I can only imagine how difficult that is.
Not just that. I mean, there's no room for error, but B, there's only, you know, a couple of dozen shots you might be able to take.
Right. Yeah. You got your roll of 24 to 36. I don't know what it was back then. But
36, 36 we had, So 36 exposures. I mean, a lot of the pros at that stage, what they'd do is they'd have multiple cameras, and they'd have someone, so they'd shoot the roll of film and then take it up to the surface, and then someone would come bring the next roll of film, the next camera back down. So you know, they would, and that's how they managed to get the number of shots. Right. But I mean, I was never in that league. So yeah, it was 36 exposures. So that was it. Then I was out of there. Yeah.
It's come a long way, man. I mean, just because I mentioned to you earlier, I do sports and I cover a lot of I do a lot of commercial photography, advertising photography as well. And the fact that back in the day, you only had, you know, 36 shots, and that was if you were shooting the same environment the whole time. You know, if you needed to change film speed or you needed to change to black and white. You know.
The one thing I think there's, like everything, there's pros and cons to everything, but I think that discipline of trying to get it right in camera, of trying to nail the peak of the action rather than being able to shotgun it, you know, to spray and pray. I mean, I appreciate probably the end result probably doesn't actually vary that much, but I think it's quite a good discipline to have.
Absolutely.
And you know, photographically, I don't regret those days, although they were very challenging. But
those days have really, I mean, even when I do workshops or I talk to friends about photography and try to, the first thing I do is like get it right in camera. You know, I'm like, I'll be on set and they'll be, oh, well, can't you just do that in Photoshop? It'll take like, a minute. And I'm like, yeah, but it'll take me 30 seconds to go move that piece of trash right now, or move that, suitcase or whatever it is out of the way. And I'm like, but you guys don't understand is that where it'll only take, a minute or two in Photoshop now, back in the 90s when Photoshop first came out, you would do something and it would take you, half an hour.
Go make a cup of coffee.
Exactly.
Right.
You'd run a filter in Photoshop back then, and you'd go to lunch.
I think this is the photography or underwater photography version of I had to walk a mile in snow to go to class. I think we're all ages, but we were all better off for it because
I have to say though, so the other side of it is that I was actually kind of falling out of love with photography. And particularly underwater photography, actually. So the digital era has brought the love back. So it's not simple to hark back to that bygone era when it was great because we only had this and this, and we managed to make these amazing images. Yeah. And there's no doubt that digital imaging and all the other stuff that's come with it, the ability to share images easily, the ability to get that's made it just so much more enjoyable pastime.
For sure,
and an easier profession possibly, but still, I think we shouldn't underestimate that as progress.
Oh, absolutely not. And I was one of the guys that held out personally. I mean, I held out on digital for a long time until I was shooting for a car magazine at the time, and they sent me to R&R Donnelly, which had a plant in Mendota, Illinois, which is basically the podunk out in the middle of nowhere, cow pasture kind of place. But I went there and they took me into this rather large room, and it had a bunch of cubicles you could walk up to, and each one had a different set of lights above it. One of them had a set of fluorescent lights, one of them had a set of tungsten, one of them had daylight balanced, etc. And on the table it had like 3 different magazine spreads, and they printed digital, film, and medium format, and on each one, and said, tell me the difference. And I went and I started looking, and I'm like, well, printed, I really can't. I looked, I had the loop out, and had a magnifying glass, and I'm looking and really getting into it, and I couldn't. So at that point I switched. I could still pick up a piece of film and look at it through a loop and look at a screen and say, yeah, this film is a lot more rich in color or whatever. But the actual printed piece, I couldn't tell the difference. And at that point I went out like the next week when I got back and bought I bought a Fuji S1 Pro, I think was the. So it was like it was a Nikon based camera,
Nikon F mount,
but it was put out by Fuji, and I think it was something silly. I think it was like 5 megapixels or something like that. It wasn't very much,
but it actually the either the S1 or the S2, I can't remember, actually had a TTL protocol that you could push out through the hot shoe. So you could actually use it with TTL strobes. Which was unique, and at the time, that was a big deal because the vast majority of stuff you were back onto manual, and people wanted TTL, and so and that was it was quite a unique thing. Those I think it was the S2 Pro actually, but maybe the S1 could as well. But it was great. It was a good camera actually. Yeah.
And
it was a great camera, and it performed very well for many years. So I finally started getting into I think after that I finally went to the D200. I think it's the D200. 200H.
Dalton's actually going backwards now. He just told me he's buying a Kodak Brownie, so I don't know what's happening over there.
The housing. The housing is the problem, isn't it?
Exactly. All right. Well, let's get back to Adam here. And so, okay, so you got into underwater photography at the same time, and then from that point on, you were in love with it, and it just built from there.
Yeah, like I say, I shot a lot through the 80s, and then
Yeah.
I moved to the UK in the early 90s, and it was cold, and you know, and actually, to be fair, in between I'd worked in Egypt, in the Red Sea, and various other places along the way.
That had to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, early 90s in Egypt was very cool. You know, it was,
so were you doing diving and photography as part of, at least as full-time work for your job, Adam, or were you doing something?
Yeah, so I was a dive bum. I was dive guide, so I was just guiding dives as an instructor, and you know, usual way, didn't make any money, but had a good lifestyle.
But living the good life, yeah, exactly.
That's right, yeah. I did that, and then I moved to the UK, and one of my other passions at the time was always mountaineering, and I kind of did a lot of mountaineering in that time as well, which
Nice.
in the UK I saw it as being quite a sensible option. And then I kind of rekindled my sort of my diving. I went on a trip to Malta, of all places, actually, in about 95, 96.
Okay.
And that kind of really got me going again, and I started shooting again. I dug the Nokonos out for a while, and then gradually shifted over onto digital as digital was starting to happen. Much the same sort of stuff we were talking about, Dolce, and same sort of process, really. Yeah. Although I actually started with compacts. I started with compact digital cameras.
As did we, actually.
Yeah.
We were both
our underwater
setups. We were Olympus SP350s was our first entry.
Well, I had SP350, but before that I had a Ricoh, and I had another one before. So my first kind of proper compact was an SP350, which is great cameras, actually.
Oh, it was.
You know, that combination of being able to shoot raw and having manual exposure control was actually really unique. And ironically, the 550 didn't have the manual exposure control. I think that's right saying that. So the SP350 was a better camera for anyone.
And the hot shoot, it was one of the only compacts with the hot shoot on it.
Yeah. And it, you know, it was also really cool because people started developing this kind of ecosystem of add-on lenses as well.
Yes.
So I had an in-on wet fisheye and an in-on macro lens that had a bracket that went underneath the camera, and you know, and so you know, you were starting to really. I mean, everyone looks at that now and goes, well, of course, but at the time that was actually quite new.
It was groundbreaking. Yeah.
That's
awesome.
So I went through that whole process, and then SP350, and then my next camera I bought, ironically, was the Nikon D2XS. So I went from anyway,
that's a big jump.
And I actually, in fact, I bought it off the WetPixel forum. Someone was advertising the WetPixel forum, and it was a good deal. So I bought it.
Exactly.
And that was the beginning of the end. I've never had any money since, you know.
I think we all have similar stories, and I think also WetPixel were involved for all of us right around the same time then. So why don't we transition into telling us? I had
a couple more questions about as far as when you had your Nokonos and your when you switched to compact and all that. Were you still running lights then? I mean, did you have like the old Nokonos light, and did you switch to Inons with the SP350 or CNC?
The SP350, I had CNCs actually. I had a YS90, and I had one originally, and then I bought a second one. And as it happened, I was there was a UK supply. I think it was a YS180. I might have that. Anyway, I had CNC strobes. And then the Inons came because the Z240 I think came out after that. My first, sorry, I should give it a correct one. My first Inon strobes were Z240s.
Nice.
But that would have been, I already had the D2XS by then, so it would have been after that. Yeah.
Nice.
But I originally had an SB105 with the Nokonos.
Okay.
But actually, that I think I flooded it, and it never recovered. So
I think Todd's been there with that, haven't you, Todd? Did you flood one of your Icolites?
Nope. I've flooded at my very first Sony point and shoot housing, but luckily
I thought you flooded one of your batteries or
I
something.
flooded a DS51 strobe, but not a
Yeah.
housing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
sort of
No, I meant the strobe.
okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I meant the strobe.
Yeah. Yeah, but luckily it was a cheap fix. Guys at iClight are awesome about that. But
Yeah.
Hopefully, I'm the only one in this group that is flooded a housing.
Well, I'm afraid that the short answer is there's no one hasn't flooded housing yet.
Yeah, yeah. Given enough dives, it happens to everyone. Yeah. Given
I
enough
don't wish
dives,
it on anybody,
happen.
but
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's tough. So, go ahead, Dalton. You're done. Okay.
Cheers.
All right. Cheers. Cheers. We'll assume that's tea in there and not anything more exciting. So we're all around those days kind of also discovered, it sounds like, WetPixel, right around the time we all had our SP350s and we're wanting to know more about digital underwater photography. And all of a sudden this magical community, WetPixel, showed up in our lives. And it sounds like right around the same time, Adam, it was the same.
Was that like around 2005, Adam?
I think I joined in 2003, but it was round about then. Certainly, I wasn't particularly active to start off with, so I mean, the history of WetPixel. There's this sort of what sort of happened with WetPixel was there was a bunch of people globally, really, who were using digital cameras underwater, but essentially no one really knew what they were doing, and some of them had backgrounds in film, some of them didn't, and there was a big sort of gap in the knowledge of how to shoot digital cameras underwater.
Right.
And it started off as a bulletin board. It started off, that was the way things were in those days. It was just a straightforward bulletin board, and people sharing ideas and experience, and that's where it grew from. And that started off, and in actual fact, kind of Eric kind of picked it up.
Eric Cheng, since we haven't mentioned his name. Eric Cheng, excuse me.
Sorry, yeah. So, and Eric kind of picked it up and built it up and developed it into much more of a community-based resource. But certainly, it started off really, and I'm going to be rude, but there's a bunch of geeks, basically sharing information on how to take pictures underwater, because people weren't doing it. And to some extent, I mean, I don't know whether I can call the WetPixel community a bunch of geeks, because I'm not sure that's true anymore. But
that's okay.
It's all right.
We geek out about something.
Yeah, I take
pride in that. It's kind of cool to be a geek now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So, but I mean, that's really, in many ways, is what the WetPixel community still is. It's a bunch of people getting together to try and solve problems that we have in common. And I think that's something, its strength. It still does that really, really well. There's a huge body of information on there, historical information, but also it's kind of place where you can put a question on there, and inevitably you get a bunch of answers, and that's a really cool thing to have, isn't it?
It's really the heart of what Pixel was all about. I know where I transitioned there was another thing, Scuba Board. I don't know if you're right. It was the same thing. And there was a small photography forum on Scuba Board back in the day, but there was just not that many people doing it. So you couldn't find any answers there. And then when WetPixel came around, it was like, oh my God, there's all these people that have so much information. It was like, okay, here's my new home. Yeah. We're those geeks that that have found their place to come home to, So, and to this day, it's still the heart of it. In my mind, the forums are amazing. So, like,
it's a wonderful kind of it's a very supportive venue. There's very, very, I mean, I've been a moderator on the forum now for, 2020, so I've been a moderator on the forum for 15 years, and the number of problems we have to sort out where people are being rude to each other, it's almost never happens. I mean, it doesn't. Right. It has happened. Inevitably, it will, but it's very, very rare, and it's really supportive. Generally people go on there, they looking for feedback, they're looking for information, and people very generously give their time and experience to try and help out. And I think it's a real tribute to the underwater imaging community, really, in that how supportive they are about people, who are coming in to try things out, or people that are trying stuff out and, having problems. I think it's really cool.
And so I think the one of the great things about just the dive community in general is that everybody's really friendly. Even if they're not in other parts of their life, when it comes to diving and the camaraderie that you have when you get on a dive boat or go on a dive trip, you know, it transcends like language barriers and, you know, where you're from, what type of, you know, whether you grew up poor, rich, or famous, it doesn't matter. When you get in the water and you come out, you're wanting to talk about what you saw, you know, and how did you see the size of that shark, or did you see that stingray, or that, you know, Garibaldi, or whatever it is, you know, and it's just, for a minute, everybody puts down all of whatever issues they may or may not have, you know, and just come together and talk and have a good time. And I think that, you know, carries over to WetPixel and even on Scuba Board and some of the others as well. It's just, I just think that community is such a fantastic community to be part of.
So how many people, how many members do you think WetPixel has nowadays?
So I checked this morning, and we have about 32,500 registered members.
That's awesome.
Which is a pretty cool number.
Yeah.
I think that the metric is a little bit skewed, and we have in common with all the forums and Scuba Board, I know, suffers from the same problem. And we're all suffering from, not suffering from, it's the wrong word, but social media has presented new challenges. And you know, the numbers game on social media can be pretty amazing. You know, there's one underwater photography resource on Facebook that claims to have 100,000 likes, and you know, it just is. It doesn't exist. You know, it's not possible. You know, and sadly, of course, we all know that, you know, you can obtain those kinds of things by buying them effectively. You know, if I throw a bunch of money at Facebook, I'll get a bunch of likes. It doesn't mean those likes have any value, and that's the problem. You know, we've got the WetPixel community of 32,500 people. You know, those people have all gone out of their way. They've all registered. They've all signed up. They've all gone through the process of actually validating their email and then making a post in the forums. You know, it's not a simple kind of like, I'll click here because I like it. It's and that, I think that has some sort of meaning as well.
And I'm sure you guys have a ton of other people that come and visit the site that aren't registered yet. So
there is. I mean, you know, there are metrics on that too, but I think the great thing and what's really important about WetPixel is this idea that it is a community, you know, and I'm very, very keen to keep it as a community of a group of people that basically help each other out, and share ideas, share, you know, problems they've had, that kind of thing. Because I think that's really what it should be. And that's I think that's what it, you know, what it's really good at. So
no, it's a fantastic resource. I think it's probably the best online resource for underwater photography that I've seen.
So do you remember, Dalton, the first time? Like I kind of have burned in my brain when I first discovered WetPixel, when I must have searched for it. I'm like, oh my God. And I think it was right around the time. So Eric was running it back then. And it was right around the time he had a picture of this baby turtle that's now quite famous. Like, put Eric as his photographer on the map, where it's just very close up, and it's got this crazy wide-eyed expression. His fins are up. He's like, right? And it got circulated. And so, like, oh my God, he's runs this awesome site and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'll like find more about Eric and all his amazing pictures. And I go to his site, and I think she's like, well, I play the cello and I do all this stuff. I'm like, wait, I don't, what? But I'm like, well, this is awesome. This cello player, and it's everything music and blah, blah, blah. But then all of a sudden there's this amazing forum that he had started. And then I fell in love, and I was on the forums all the time, reading as much as I could and learning as much as I could. And it was great. But I just remember that photo. And then I'm like, this guy, Eric, and he plays the cello. And then I think it's right around the time he was going to Tiger Beach to then take all these videos at the time. and that's kind of when I first really got really involved and fell in love with it.
And the other thing about Eric, I mean, Eric's an incredibly I think he's probably the brightest guy that I know. I don't know whether that's probably unfair to some other people, but he's a super bright guy. He's got this incredible kind of diverse skill base, but on top of it all, he's a really nice guy.
Yeah,
and that's it's just whenever you interact with him, and I don't know if you had the opportunity to interact with him, he's just really nice guy,
so how did you end up going from a guy that, like me, just discovered WetPixel and started using the forum to meeting Eric and then having that transition from being just one of us to all of a sudden saying, hey, I'm gonna transition and take over, look to run that. Tell us that story.
So I think really it revolves around Eric to some extent, in that Eric basically was reaching a point in his life where he wanted to get married, he wanted to have kids. He felt that he should be establishing a more conventional career. I'm putting those words in his mouth, but I'm assuming that's the case. So basically he needed help running the site, and he advertised for an editor, and it was simple as that. So I responded to the advert and I got the job, and I started off as the editor, and primarily posting stuff onto the WetPixel front page, but also and from that obviously moderating the forums and all the other stuff. And I did that for quite a few years, and gradually Eric's life was becoming more, he worked for Litro for a while, and then for DJI quite sort of famously, and then moves on to Facebook, which is where he is now. And his life was obviously becoming more complicated, I suppose. 2 kids, and so it was a natural thing, really, that rather than keeping the decision making process between, albeit a fairly tight group, it made sense to move it on. So I bought the site from Eric at the end of 2018, and so now I own it and publish it and everything else. And I think that's kind of it was a very organic process, in that you mentioned meeting Eric. I actually worked for Eric for 6 years before I met him. Which just shows you the times we live in. So literally 6 years. I mean, obviously we Skype, we did all the other stuff that we do in these days, but I actually physically met him. I've been working for 6 years, so
that's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And does he? You bought WetPixel in 2018.
End of 2018, yeah.
Yeah. Does he still have any?
Does he still contribute?
Does he still contribute to?
So
WetPixel,
he's got a sort of back. What's the word? He's always there if I need him. He's always there. He'll help out, but he kind of keeps himself in the background. He's not doing horror shooting underwater at the moment, I think, just because of time and family and that kind of stuff. But I think the way Eric views it is probably, once the kids are a bit older and life stabilizes out, he'll probably loop back around to it, which I think is probably what he'll do.
Okay.
And then at that point, I'm sure he'll be back and more involved. Certainly, he still is. He's an advisor to WetPixel, and certainly if I've got a problem, I generally tend to Skype him and ask him.
Yeah.
So
we have
awesome. We have a good relationship. We have good communication. So
that's awesome. That's fantastic.
And so now you still, is it primarily for article creation and content creation and moderation, is it primarily just you, or do you have a small staff that help you run the ship there?
So content creation is primarily me, although having said that, I mean, we welcome and solicit content submitted by other people. So it's an editorial role rather than necessarily a creation role. I mean, yes, sure, press release and stuff. I post most of the stuff out, and the forums themselves, we have a team of moderators obviously moderate it, and very active, keeping everything running smoothly on there. So I mean, it is primarily me. The good news is, I mean, I'm done actually full time. I have a dive school here in the UK as well, so I still teach people to dive.
Oh, cool.
But the two are, I can manage both. And they kind of complement each other in some ways as well. So So yeah. So yeah, I'm a, you know,
That's still like having 2 full-time jobs.
Yeah.
it kind of is, yeah, yeah.
So,
But
yeah.
I mean, I haven't got any kids, and you know, and
Yeah.
and so you know, it's 2 full-time jobs in both in areas that I really love. So
Right.
it doesn't feel like going to work
And
in the morning, if you know what I mean. So
oh no, for sure. And it's not like it's 2 different full-time jobs. It's not
No,
like
exactly.
you're cooking at one and, you know, typesetting at another, you know.
Yeah. I think they're pretty complimentary. I'm not saying it's not busy. It is busy, but
for sure.
but it's good busy, not bad busy. So
exactly. Exactly. That's awesome.
Without you brought up that you're occasionally in the community have to step in as to some issues. With any interesting stories, like not to badmouth community members, but just interesting, funny stories or that you can think of in your job as editor, and to have to manage 32,000 very passionate photographers that I'm sure it could, you know, we can be opinionated in some times. Any stories that pop out in your mind that you can share with?
I think there was a wonderful story about a particular gentleman who had told everyone that he was so he was espousing on the forums a particular brand of housing and singing their praises. And so the rule on WetPixel was that as long as you're overt, so you know, if someone says this person's giving me a housing, and you say, oh, I've got this housing for free, I'm now going to say nice things about it, that's fine, you know, because everyone knows the sort of value of the advice that you're providing, or the value of the feedback you're providing. Whereas, sorry, that's the guy arriving down there. He's heard I'm talking about him.
Found you out that fast.
All right, yeah, that word gets around. Anyway, he told everyone that he'd been given the housing, and then proceeded to write nice things about it. So I had to get involved and say, you can't do that. And he said, oh, no, I bought the housing. And it turns out that he decided that to wind everyone up, that he would, in other words, to play a prank on him. He told him it was a free housing. It wasn't a free housing, but so that got kicked around and got very complicated because everyone was now saying, "Oh no, he told me he gave me a housing." I don't, yeah, so no. That's the kind. That's the most frequent kind of stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, you're dealing with people, and people, you know, different people do behave in different ways. I'm sure there are better stories than that. Now you put me on the spot. I can't think of any of them.
That's right. I figured most of them would be, you know, Nikon's better than Canon.
The best are the 2 of the best stories, and this is a good story. Is we did it. So the first workshop that Alex Mustard and I ran in Lemberg in 2013. Yes, and we ran a workshop, and it was just before vacuums had become commonplace, and we had on that trip 3 camera floods, like terminal camera floods,
right?
And it's the Lemberg sand got in there and did its thing. So we decided at the end of it we were going to run a spoof article, and what we do is we take the cameras without housings underwater and shoot a sequence of pictures of people taking pictures with these flooded cameras. So we did this and got these pictures, and I built it out as the ultimate Canon versus Nikon test and all this kind of, I mean, it was just a big spoof. Oh God, the feedback. I mean, we had to so it started off like, how can you deliberately flood these cameras when I can't even afford a camera myself? You know, it was kind of, we had to put a warning at the bottom saying no cameras were harmed in the making of this article, because everyone assumed, or lots of people seem to assume, that we deliberately take cameras underwater to get these pictures. And the comments, I mean, they got really, really angry. It was like, no, they were flooded already. They were broken before we took them underwater. Yeah. So that was
that had to be, even knowing they were broke, that still had to be slightly painful.
Well, they weren't mine, so they weren't painful at all. But no.
Exactly.
I
just can't imagine taking even broken. I'm like, I would be like, it just seems so wrong.
Yeah.
One of them was a Nikon D800. So I mean, and well, there was a 5D Mark 3 or 4. Anyway, they were good cameras. You know, they were expensive cameras.
Yeah.
And the magnesium in the bodies actually starts fizzing It's all a bit
Oh, wow.
disconcerting. I didn't know this was going to happen, of course. So I got this guy doing lens changes underwater, taking the lens off, and showing everyone how he could change lenses underwater, to get different. You want to go wide angle? Just take it off and show you. And suddenly I realized there was all this like fizz coming up inside the camera. I was like, I'm not sure we should be doing this.
What do explosions look like underwater? Let's find out.
That's funny.
That's crazy. We'll see if you can dig up some of the footage from that from that incident. So I'm sure it's around somewhere. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, just, the comments is the funny bit, but
yeah, exactly. So you mentioned Alex and Lembe, one of my favorite places to go. That brings up recently in the last few months, you and Alex kind of teamed up to do this WetPixel Live YouTube series recently.
Yeah.
So first of all, before you get, this is another thing, Dalton and I tend to bring up Alex's name quite a bit because we're big fans of his as well. Yeah. How did Alex get involved? Has he always been involved with WetPixel? When did he jump on with you, or did you have a relationship with him? Kind of let us know about that.
So Alex, actually, I think Alex was WetPixel. Oh, he definitely was WetPixel member before I was.
Right.
And in fact, he was involved right at the beginning. So he was still at that point, still at university, still in his university career. And I think so certainly he was involved quite a long time before I was. I was a moderator and was always very, very active on the forums and also writing articles for WetPixel, and has always been. He's been very much he's associate editor for WetPixel and has been involved and still is to this day. And sort of almost in parallel, there were a couple of projects we collaborated, underwater photography projects we collaborated actually here in the UK. And we collaborated on it, and that was sort of almost, well, the first one was simply that the venue that I used for a lot of my diver training was, he wanted to come and practice some remote strobe stuff up here, and so we got together, and to be honest, we became friends, and that's sort of where it started. And so him and I have collaborated on all sorts of stuff now, including workshops and everything else. And he is my favorite underwater photographer in terms of his work. And we're friends basically. So it's an easy relationship to kind of build on, really.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I think I first discovered and Alex, because I think he wrote one of the chapters in Martin Edge's book, The Underwater Photographer, the Big Encyclopedia. I think he did it on Super Macro or something like that. And I'm like, man, this guy's amazing. I don't remember him as part of the community before then, but yeah, once I discovered her work, I was like, it was amazing. And his scientific mind behind getting everything set up, it was really cool.
It was one of the things I think about the forum, and this is still the case, is that because a lot of people hide behind pseudonyms, which is fine, that's the nature of forums. And sometimes you find out who these people are, and they're the complete guides of the underwater imaging community, and they're busy telling you why your lens isn't working at f5.6, and it's phenomenal. And again, these are busy people who lead busy lives, and yet they'll step in to come and help out with what are really for them relatively mundane issues. And that's it's a awesome. Great tribute to their selflessness, really. I mean, Alex certainly falls into that picture. Alex, he's one of those guys. He's one of those guys that is he will always share. He's not one of these people that hoards techniques. Some people, they discover something new and they keep it to themselves. Alex is exactly the reverse. He'll throw it out there. If someone asks him, he'll answer them, and he's really generous with his time and his expertise. So,
yeah. And so now you're putting out on your YouTube channel. If you go to WetPixel's YouTube channel, you'll see this series called WetPixel Live that you started, I'm guessing, then around March by any chance, probably right around the time.
A bit later. We were a bit late on the uptake, and I think really what our goal was, and I have to say, I think it was primarily Alex's idea. Certainly the conception of it was Alex's idea. I kind of wanted to do something, but I wasn't also sure what. And really the goal is to provide a kind of, a lot of those queries that occur on the forum recur, people ask the same questions. And the idea is that this answers those queries. And it's another way of getting the information out there. and we found increasingly that, and I mean, I know I do it. If I want to figure out how to do something, I'll go on YouTube and find a video on how to do it. And so that was kind of our motivation behind doing it. And so it sort of is designed to be the sort of hard-edged information that people need or are struggling to find in another format, really. It's been really popular. It's doing well, and they're also. I mean, I have to say they're great fun to make because Alex and I are friends, and generally we never have telephone conversations less than 3/4 of an hour. It's impossible.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah.
Against the laws of physics, because once we get on the phone, we're chatting about this and that, and before you know it, it's 3/4 of an hour. And this is kind of the same thing, really. We sit down, we stop, and it takes us. You look at a 15-minute episode. What you don't realise is that because we've had to chat a lot along the way, it's taken us an hour to make that episode.
Oh, no. Yes, of course.
Just because we're chatting,
Yeah.
It's a good thing, not a bad thing.
It's a great series. It's educational for people of all levels. There's something to be found there, and you cover everything from basic topics like for people just getting photography. Here are the fresh 5 things you should know, all the way to spending 20 minutes talking about diffusers, which is awesome. I just watched that video. No, I loved it. I just watched it. I mean, again, being one of the geeks that you referred to back in the day, I'm like, this is awesome. 20 minutes talking about diffusers and domes and how, these are the types of the fun things that us photographers love to geek out about. So they're awesome, really well done. And you can tell you guys have a great rapport with each other. So it's always fun to watch.
And they're the kind of subjects. I mean, I know that the diffuser one's probably a good choice because they're the kind of subject that actually it's not written down anywhere. This information, you can't go and buy a book on it. You can't. I don't even know if you Google it what you get, which is Whereas there is diffusers are important and they're an important tool that we use. Absolutely. And yet it's almost like folklore to get hold of the information, and that's really the goal. That's exactly what it's about. So.
I think one of the reasons I appreciate like the diffuser one so much is that when people talk photography, especially underwater photography, they immediately go camera, and I've always been a big proponent of telling them it doesn't matter what camera you have, it matters what lights you have and how you use the light. And people will ask, oh well, how do I get rid of that blue cast? What filter do I need? I'm like, well, don't add a filter, add lights, and that's really what's going to change your photography, your video underwater. And so when I see people talk about, like you guys, with diffusers and anytime anyone does any type of lighting, educational video, I think that's just, to me, that I'll sit and I'll watch that for hours. I think that's
great stuff.
I mean, photography ultimately is about capturing light.
Exactly.
It is.
And the tools that we capture with, of course, they're important. And of course, we're not for a minute saying they're not, but ultimately, all the tool does is captures the light. And if you're providing good light, you'll get good pictures. Yep. If you're not providing good light, you won't. And that's the, or it's much harder to, should I say. So, and that's the nub of it. So anything you can do to improve the quality of light that you're trying to photograph will mean that your images will be better.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. So what, you mentioned that you had been doing trips with Alex and Lembe and things like that. What's the game plan now that COVID kind of screwed things up? Do you guys have plans for 2021 yet, or 2022?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in common with everybody else, we've basically postponed everything until next year. We had workshops planned now, and one at the end of November. In Lembe as it happens, and obviously it certainly doesn't look like there's going to be a chance to travel, so certainly the one's running now has been postponed till next year, and I'm going to make a final decision on the other one, in fact probably tomorrow, but it looks unlikely that it's going to run at this stage. So I mean, I think that we one of the things that the COVID thing is highlighting is how dependent the a lot of the resort areas and the areas that we visit as photographers and divers are on our custom, really. And I think it's really, really important that we try and plan things going forward that will, once we have a safe way of traveling, that will allow us to then to provide that custom again. I know we're all suffering to some extent with this outbreak, but I mean the degree of suffering that we're experiencing compared to what's happening in these resort areas is relatively minor, really.
And there's been a couple of groups that I'm involved with that have like all the members got together and donated to some of the resorts down, or the dive operations down in Cozumel. You give them $5 now just to be able to go back later to help keep them afloat.
I think things like GoFundMe and various other things have really people have done and the diving community is very generous, so people have supported these things. It's very uncertain times, and it's hard sometimes, but I think in general as a community, those of us that have, I don't know, disposable income, what do you want to call it, we should be looking at investing that in trips in the future, simply because that's what will keep these places alive now. It's a big ask, but I think it's an important one.
I agree.
The long answer to the short question, Todd, I'm sorry, but
no, don't be sorry. That's how we get content. We love long answers to short questions.
We have a pretty full schedule for next year, given that we had trips planned for next year anyway, and of course now we've got these on top.
So you added these to next year's schedule?
Yeah. Nice. So in a normal year I'm traveling a lot, so I do quite a lot of assignment work as well. I'm often traveling for 140 days a year, and it seems that there will be a
come on back.
That came out of those early evolutionary days of WetPixel was that actually conventional dive travel doesn't work wonderfully well for photographers, because we don't want to go along the reef. We want to stay in one place for hours looking at little stuff or whatever it may be, or set a shot, or we want to dive the same reef 10 times because we want to get the sun in the right place, or whatever it may be. And Eric started running photographically productive trips, and that's the way they're described. They're designed to be photographically productive. They're not necessarily workshops, and there's a distinct difference. Workshop is a formal learning experience where there will be sit down lessons. I mean, nothing's mandatory, but there will be presentations to do with technique and ideas. There'll be image reviews, all that kind of stuff. And that we run those, and they are formal kind of learning experiences. But then actually the bulk of trips we run are photographically productive travel. So for example, we plan to be in Rajarampat in April next year. And we chartered the boat will go where we want it to go because we've chartered the whole boat. And we'll go out there, and the goal is that we'll try and find the places and the conditions that are most photographically productive, and go there and shoot a bunch of images. And now of course you've got a bunch of photographers on board. Do you learn stuff from the photographers? Of course you do.
Of course.
There's a great creative kind of feud that generates, and that's almost organic. It's not it's not something that we do encourage it, but it's not a formal learning thing.
Right.
But so the majority of our trips are kind of photographically productive diving trips, as opposed to workshops, and then we run the workshops on top. To answer the question again, sorry, long answer. Typically, we run kind of maybe 2 workshops a year-ish, and probably 3 or 4 non-workshop photographic trips.
Nice.
That's awesome.
And we do some of them are perennials. We normally go to Ila for the whale sharks every year.
Yeah.
Just because it's such an amazing event. I mean, I've been 7 times or 8 times now, and still I love it. I really miss not being there this year. And so again, and some of them are off the wall kind of one-offs. that we do, occasionally, and everything in between, really.
So out of all of your one-offs, what have been some of your favorites?
Oh, that's a challenge. I don't know if it's one of my one-offs, but I mean, I really, really like diving with sharks, and photographing sharks, and so I know we're probably we may look at some images later on, but the if I was to have a spiritual home, then it probably would be Tiger Beach, and I would say probably so for you to ask me, and it's not really a one-off because it's very repeatable, but it is a fantastic place to dive, and the experience of being in the water with very large, there we are, that's it, yeah, with very large sharks, who are simply not interested in us, beyond the fact that we might have some food for them, which they quite like the idea of getting hold of, but they're not. It is just such an amazing experience. I think in many ways that, I mean, I love all marine life, but I particularly am drawn to marine life that has a level of intelligence, and certainly these sharks display a great deal of intelligence, and I find that fascinating. And photographically trying to capture that sort of the fact that they're intelligent, have personalities, that kind of thing, I think is a fantastic thing to try and do. I'm not sure I managed, but yeah.
So just my quick, and every podcast disclaimer will have this. So we are going to be sharing a few of Adam's images that we asked him to show us to talk about. So if you happen to be listening on the podcast, go ahead and either check the show notes. We'll have links to all of Adam's images, or if you happen to be using the Overcast podcast player, it'll be showing up right now as chapter art. But we're currently looking at a beautiful large tiger shark that was at Tiger Beach, I'm assuming. Adam, is that right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about this photo.
Again, possibly in the background, Tiger Beach is on the Grand Bahama banks. It's about 25 miles offshore from Grand Bahama, and no one really knows why, but pretty much every year, large female tigers come in. The general consensus is that they're probably pregnant, so it may be something to do with the sheltered waters, and it's a place where they can hang out during gestation before they go and pop in the mangroves. So and various people, Jim Abernethy, Eric, Cheng, and others discovered it. I'm not sure whether that's contentious, but certainly they
popularized it for sure.
They popularized it, yeah, certainly. And it's one of these. It's an amazing place. The diving is baited, but the sharks are, they're not behaving in any way. They're not reacting to the food as food. They're coming because there's food there, and when the food's gone, they leave. And that's the way they react. And you get these wonderful experiences seeing very large. Frequently you'll have 7 or 8 large tiger sharks hanging around, cruising around you at any one time. The other thing that happens there, which kind of doesn't really get in the limelight, is you can also have 20 or 30 lemon sharks, and probably the same numbers of Caribbean reef sharks, and increasingly now hammerheads, bull sharks. Pretty much anything can happen there now. So it's a really, really cool place, and I think that it's something it's a place that every diver should dive at least once, because it will change your mind about sharks forever. We all have preconceptions about sharks, and diving there is one of these incredible educational experiences where it's simply you realise that most of what you know about sharks is probably wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there we go. Tiger Beach on the top of one of the top dives on Adam's list for sure, and he's got a beautiful photo. I love the all the detail, and you can really see the patterns of the stripes. It's a nice profile view, and you've obviously got it's a great shot. But just as an amateur side, just the beautiful stripes on the tiger is captured here. So nice shot.
Do you remember about how big this?
She was about 5 meters. So what's that? 15 feet, something like that.
15 feet. Yeah.
So it's, you know, a really big animal, and you know, I think personally the reason I like this image is with the diver in the background is, you know, it does give it some perspective. You know,
give it some scale.
There's a little bit of forced perspective here because, of course, the diver is some at his distance behind her, but nevertheless, you know, it makes the diver look very small.
Yes, it's all art, right? So it doesn't, you know, it's purveying the grandeur and the beauty of the shark. So
and she's also completely disinterested in either me or the diver. You know, there's she's just swimming by. She's not bothered whether we're there or not. And you know, that to me is it kind of typifies that, you know, they're quite aloof. Don't really interact. They're not really bothered whether we're there or not.
And also to see some of the work that, you know, you mentioned Jim Abernathy, to see some of the work that he's done with these amazing sharks have just been, you know, you used the same word twice, it's just been amazing. I mean, they'll come and interact with him and scratch my back, scratch my belly, scratch my nose.
We use an operation on there called Epic, and it's a husband and wife team of Deb and Vincent. And these guys, you know, not only they name the sharks, which is fine, you know, to have names, but sharks they will identify their sharks in a good mood or a bad mood. You know, this is the level of how well they know these animals. Now, you know, if you've ever owned a pet, you know, a dog or a cat, you can recognize this in them. So logically, why should shark be different? You know, there is no reason. But to actually be at the level where you're actually able to go, you know,
discern it.
Lady's in a mood today, you know, and you go, why is lady in a mood? Because ladies do this. And like, okay, well, yeah, she was doing that. You know, that's pretty incredible level. So the guys that are down there and wrangling them full time, you know, Jim is certainly another good example. You know, they're just amazing, and you know, they have this sort of relationship with the sharks that's pretty amazing. I think, you know, it's really, really good. Yeah.
And just to see them not just doing it for tourism, but doing it for awareness, and also to take care of the sharks, because once they get that level of comfort with them, I think Jim said he's removed like over 100 hooks from these sharks over the years, you know, and to see them remove where they get, you know, plastic caught on them when they were young, and they've grown and the plastic's just grown into their bodies and stuff. And it's just,
so the other thing that we probably should give credit to, because obviously the operators, so people like Jim and Epic and the other operators do a great job, but actually the Bahamas, you know, have a really, really forward-looking policy in terms of shark conservation that I think, you know, we really need to give them credit for. There's so many countries in the world that don't protect sharks. And the Bahamas, you know, have been doing it for 20 years. And I mean, 20 years ago, who was talking about protecting sharks? Nobody. You know, it really is. It was very, very forward looking. And you know, they police it, they look after it, they recognize them as a resource for tourism. And you know, and that's really the only other place I can think of that's as forward-looking is Fiji. You know,
Palau come along recently with a lot of their.
I was trying to think how was it. I think it was the late '90s when they did this shirt. Like, is that 20 years ago? Oh my God, I think it's 20 years ago. Right? But so Fiji. But no, to your point, Fiji. But there, I mean, we're talking 3 in the world, right? 3 areas in the world that can come to mind.
That's
it. So
and you know, the biggest shark fishing fleet in the world is the Spanish. You know, it's a European country. You know, you know, so you know, we really, you know, this is something that well, it'd be nice to think that other countries, but we really should give the Bahamas. You know,
definitely,
absolutely,
they jumped in right at the beginning and have stuck with it. You know, kind of been easy. So.
Yeah, and it's good to see more countries and more islands are jumping on board the marine conservation and making marine parks and marine reserves. I heard recently that, I don't remember, I want to say, I know I'm going to be wrong, but I want to say it's either the United Nations or a couple of countries are getting together to try to make the largest marine reserve like in the center of the Atlantic. Saw something about that recently, and that'd be awesome to try to help.
I think it was originally a US initiative actually creating this MPA, again, I can't. It's the name of the islands has escaped me, but yeah, and it will make the marine reserves are a really good idea. They're a really good thing. I think the other thing that's really important is this idea of ecotourism, and
Yes.
I know it's a sort of fashionable tag that we tend to give things now, but the example, and I work well with examples. So I mentioned going to see the whale sharks at Isla Mujeres, and so obviously you get this aggregation going on Isla. It's been going on forever.
Yeah.
You get these huge numbers of whale sharks, 400, 500 whale sharks in a relatively small space every day.
Yeah.
It's become, a real resource for, thank you. Perfect. Yeah, there we are. That's one. I love hanging around the whale sharks. There you go. So the Mexican authorities are regulating it. There is some regulation, which it has come in, and certainly that can be somewhat controversial, perhaps. But I was chatting to the operator that we use about it, and he was saying the difference between the whale sharks and the whale shark tourism and not is the guys on the island now build their houses out of bricks rather than building out of wood, which means that when the hurricanes hit, their houses survive.
Right.
And that's kind of, that's really a fundamental kind of, your house is going to, with the whale sharks there, your house will survive a hurricane. Without it, it gets blown away.
Right.
That, when you take it down to that level, then that strikes me as being, that's really powerful ecotourism, because they have this huge vested interest in the whale sharks being there and looking after them and making sure that they still keep coming. And that, that struck me as being, people don't particularly talk about the Isla whale sharks being a successful ecotourism, but when you put it on those terms, I think it is massive.
For sure.
I think it's funny. It gets into a interesting predicament with Isla Mujeres, especially because the idea was great, and then all of a sudden became so popular that you have so many boats going out each time that they have to constantly adapt and evolve. Like anything else, you have to constantly adapt and evolve. So they realize that, well, we can't just have 900 boats out there for 2 whale sharks each time. So they have to limit the number of people that are in the water first. So they did that. And now they're issuing less and less permits. So letting less and less permits out for each, which is the right thing to do. I mean, it's great that people are getting to appreciate it, and there's more awareness of the beauty of these creatures. But now that it's so popular, they have to then take the next step of protecting them. So, but it's a good problem to have.
I think, it is. Yeah. And I think, although people tend to like the idea of not having rules, I think we do have to have rules.
Yes.
For sure. I mean, Todd and I were in Isla Mujeres 2018.
Yeah.
Right.
And we went out, and they had, there's only 2 divers allowed in the water from any boat. Yeah. And when we first heard that rule, we were like, we had chartered a whole boat, and we had a whole group of people with us. And we were kind of like, oh, well, okay, that's fine. That just means more for less people to have to deal with, was our thought process at the time. Yeah. But then when we got out there and we saw another 100 boats come out, you're talking, okay, well, 2 people from each boat, that's going to be 100 people, 100 people in the water, 200 people in the water.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people. And so for them to start limiting that, I think it's definitely a good thing.
I think that there's to an extent the supply and demand as well, in that the price will increase, which actually from an ecotourism point of view is not a bad thing, because if you can reduce demand on the resource while still maintaining the same income for those that are needing that resource, that's good for the environment too, in lots of different ways. Everything from boat fumes all the way down. So I think to some extent that it's a successful ecotourism
for sure
case study.
And we're looking at this one photo right now of, looks like you took with a fisheye, and you're underneath the whale shark, and it's just, you got the sunball right above it, so you get the God rays coming down, and it's a gorgeous shot. And about how far below the whale shark do you think you were with that?
So for those that don't know, everything on the Isla is on a snorkel, free diving. So I'm holding my breath at this point. I'm not on scuba. So the problem, of course, is that you got to line the sunball, the shark, yourself, all up in the right place at the right time, whilst holding your breath, while swimming about to try and get into it,
Yes.
which is challenging.
And they're not slow.
No, they're not slow. And the advantage I had with this one is this is actually not a very big shark.
Okay.
So if it was a fully blown one, I'd have to be a lot deeper to get it in the position I found it than I actually was. So it's a relatively small shark. So I think I'm probably about 15, 20 feet underneath this one. So I'm not a huge depth. And I have to say there was a certain amount of game planning here, and that I saw it was a smaller shark, and that's what made me decide to go for this shot.
Nice.
Because I was able to, obviously it's a very recognizable silhouette, so I've got the full silhouette, but between us anyway, it's a relatively small shark, which meant I was able to I didn't have to completely kill my ears getting down there. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a fantastic shot. You did a great job on this.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, and like Dalton says, luck equals opportunity meeting preparation, right? So you had the idea of what you wanted to get, and you needed to find that small shark, so you didn't have to go 50 feet below on one breath.
Absolutely.
And it happened to be there, so that's great.
And I knew, my camera, the settings were set. I knew I'd actually dived down previously and made sure my settings were right. So everything was set up, and it was just a question of getting down there and getting in the right place for sure. Getting awesome. Me in the right place, actually.
Right. So and again, since you wanted to capture those sun rays, so you needed it at a high f-stop, right? You needed to be something to make sure those rays are crisp.
Yeah, I actually really push shutter speed. So bear in mind, obviously, this is ambient light, so I'm not restricted in terms of my shutter speed. So I find that shutter speed helps freeze the sun rays as well. So aperture for me is not as important because I'm not worried about depth of field with this.
Right.
So I actually don't remember what the aperture was, but it will have been 1,000th.
Yeah, exactly. When you're shooting at 1,000th to freeze the action, you're not gonna be at f 2.8 anyway. So.
Yeah.
So that's great. A beautiful shot.
With an 8mm for sure. Yeah. So,
yeah, exactly.
That was an 8mm.
Yeah.
Nice. On a full frame, I would assume.
Yeah.
Nice.
So one of the shots that we haven't really talked much about cave dives on prior podcasts. So I was very excited when I asked you to share some of your photos that you sent this one. Here, let me pull it up so Dalton can see it too. I love this shot. So tell us about where you are in the shot, who you've got in the picture, and what we're looking at here.
So this actually is Mexico again, as it happens, and this is in the Yucatan. It's a cave called Otocha. Which is obviously on the Mexican mainland, on the Yucatan mainland, and in common with a lot of the Mexican caves, obviously very heavily decorated, beautiful flowstone decoration, stalagmites, stalactites. What's quite unique and possibly is something that there's lots of is the black patch in the ceiling. So obviously stalagmites and stalactites only ever form when the caves are dry. They can't form when the caves are flooded. So the first point is that the sea level had dropped in the previous ice age, and this cave was entirely exposed to air. So that's the first point. The speleothems can only form in the dry. And obviously at some point the cave is then refilled, and those black patches actually are tannic layers in the water, so they're actually reflecting soot or tannins that have come at particular stages of its flooding and have been incorporated into speleothems. So from in terms of the cave's evolution, quite a fascinating story, I think.
That is,
Yeah, you're more of a man than me, my friend.
Well,
I cave diving, I just never really. I'll do a cenote, but when I have to push my rig in front of me to get through a hole, I'm gonna stop.
so I have a background in cave diving and cave exploration. And I've done a fair amount of technical diving as well, rebreather diving, all that kind of stuff. So I have. So, and I actually really love cave diving. I particularly like trying to capture pictures of places that people really haven't been, or very few people have been. And that to me is a sort of fascination. So this is a picture. This is actually lots of people have been where this picture was taken, but this is Vincent Roca Catala who owns a fantastic cave diving outfit near Tulum called Under the Jungle. It's a great name too.
Yeah.
And him and essentially him and his exploration partner decided that Natalie Gibb decided that they needed money to go and explore new caves, so they better start a cave diving operation to fund their exploration habit, and that's pretty much what they do. You know, they basically what money they make they invest in going finding new caves somewhere. So they're amazing, and pair of them.
Yeah, it's go ahead, Adam. Sorry.
So you know, photographically, there's all sorts of interesting stuff that you can do in caves, and there's some better examples of it, to be fair, than this particular one. But you know, with remote strobes, remote lighting, video lighting, obviously by definition, you've got a lot of contrast in a cave because it's dark. So you know, continuous lights are a really good tool that you can achieve great things with. So it's, you know, it's a fascinating place to play with photographically as well.
And you're also adding that additional layer of technical ability, because you're placing these secondary lights, and you know, for backlighting and stuff like that, but you're also having to do it in a way not to kick up any silt from the bottom, to keep the water as clear as it is, which I find amazing. Very, very talented to pull that off.
Thank you. Yeah. No, it's another passion. So it's certainly something that I enjoy doing, and it's one of the, you know, I'm an adult photographer, but I'm also a diver, and you know, I love challenging diving, or diving in challenging conditions as well. So
well, you'll have, well, we don't live in Florida anymore, but you'd love Florida.
I've dived in Florida, and I've dived in the caves.
I've done a few of the springs there, and it's it's a whole nother, it's amazing. Sure.
It's lovely. Yeah, it's really lovely.
And are there any other specific, even if you didn't take pictures of any other specific, like if I say name one of your most memorable dives that you ever had, any stories that pop up at you right away that you can think of?
It's a really, really difficult one. It's a question that I'm sure we all get asked pretty frequently. You know, where's the best place to dive? You know, where's your favorite dive? And my stock answer is always, it's where I'm diving today. And you know, and that kind of, it's a bit of a cop out, I know, but it kind of it sort of deals with the problem. It's so hard.
Well, how about I'll help narrow it down a little bit, because what I always tell people is I can't pick any one spot. So how about you ask me, what's my favorite place for sharks? So what's your favorite shark destination?
Oh, well, that's easy. Tiger Beach.
Beach.
No, there we are. So
critters.
Okay. So can I have two? Am I
absolutely.
Okay, so definitely Lembeh, obviously critical capital of the world, and a close second will be Hanlon in the Philippines. No, can I have three? Yeah. So Dumaguete in the Philippines as well. So you know, you've got obviously Dumaguete and Lembeh, both black sand destinations where you've got, you know, critters running on black sand, which makes them easier to find. Hanlon tends to be, there is some black sand, but it tends to be a little more corally. So you get different types of critters. So yeah, I mean, and the, you know, the experiences. So again, you talk about, you know, critters, you know, particularly experiences things like octopus, for example.
Right.
You know, they're just such charismatic animals, and going back to, I think, you know, I mentioned this idea of intelligence. Yeah, thank you. You know, there's so much intelligence that these guys exhibit.
Have you watched My Octopus Teacher on Netflix yet, Adam?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And obviously it's very topical at the moment. But there's a huge kind of, there's a lot of research that's been done into how bright these things are, and you know, and you know, octopuses will give most dogs a run for their money in terms of intelligence. You know, and yet they've got what we would call brains a fraction of the size. They have more than one brain, which helps. But you know, I think, you know, the way, but the other thing about the octopus, which I think is quite unique, is they're very, very, there's a very much two-way communication with the octopus. You know, in that they're checking you out and you're checking them out. It's not a one-way street, you know, where you're observing and they're observing you as much as you're observing them.
Yeah, they're very inquisitive.
They are, and that, you know, they seem to learn, they seem to be fascinated by what we're doing, and that's you know, there's a great deal of interaction with them, and I love that kind of interaction. So you know, yeah, I guess there we are. Where's my favorite macro destination? Anyway, I can find octopus.
Well,
there you go. How about that?
No, I like it. Actually, before we knew the world was changing, I was trying to convince Dalton we needed to go to the Philippines, and I had mentioned Anilao.
Yeah.
So, if would you, of the places to go in the Philippines, if you had never gone to either place, would you go to Anilao first, or would you go somewhere else? Where would you go for your first trip? If with the goal of shooting, with the goal of shooting critters, let's say.
If you want black sand, I would go to Dumaguete. If you want sort of more corally type macro, I'd go to Anilao. And Anilao has lovely wide angle too, which Dumaguete. Well, no, that's not fair, because Dumaguete has Verde Island, which is really good. Really good wide angle. So that's not fair either. So, you know, to be honest, either place is awesome. You know, they're all good.
Can't go wrong either way.
You can't go wrong. No, I mean, you know, if you enjoy kind of macro shooting, both are amazing destinations. Yeah. So.
I don't know how many times you've been, but do you remember who you stayed with at those places? So
I've stayed at various places. So Anilao, what's now Solitude Anilao, which used to be Solitude Castia, sorry. I've stayed there. Also Crystal Blue with Mike Bartik. Okay. Good destinations in Anilao, both really good resorts. And in Dumaguete, I've stayed with Atlantis and Solaya. Again, really excellent. Cool. No problems at all.
Awesome.
And Lembe, the majority of the time, or recently certainly, has been with Lembe Resort. So yeah.
You friends with Dimpy then? You get to.
I know Dimpy. In fact, I don't. You have to ask Dimpy sometime, because Dimpy, we ran a shootout between Lembe and Gulen Resort in Norway. A live macro shootout between the two resorts, which was an amazing event. In fact, we've done two. But Dimpy, the first one, Dimpy actually came out and was guiding the guys in Norway, and we had to get her in a dry suit. Of course, she'd never done anything like this. So, and the amazing thing was, you know, we got underwater, and I was running around taking pictures of the guys, taking pictures as I do, because I was covering the event, and there's Dimpy with her pointers and swimming around, going, you know, in a dry suit with dry gloves, and it was hilarious. Brilliant.
She's awesome.
Yeah, I love Dimpy. Yeah, she is. Yeah, she is.
Very cool. That's awesome. Great suggestions now for Dalton and I to look up when we get to leave our houses again. So that's awesome.
Incredible.
For sure. Now, Adam, I know we were talking marine reserves and marine parks and stuff earlier. Is there a group or many organizations that WetPixel partners with or anything? Excuse me.
So
sorry about that.
I'll be sure to leave that in.
Thanks.
We don't partner with anyone specifically, but I'm on the board of CSAVE, of the CSAVE Foundation, and I think they're a strong, powerful good. If for no other reason than they take the approach that they're very much a lobbying organisation, and so they work behind the scenes. You know, they go to the CITES meetings and they get stuff done. You know, which is pretty cool. I've also it's kind of not specifically related, but we've just launched a new initiative, or we're just about to launch a new initiative with the Citizen Science Project, the Cephalopod Citizen Science Project, nice. and these are guys basically that are studying cephalopods, octopus, squid, cuttlefish, and encouraging citizen science projects. And again, I mean, currently they're primarily UK based, but we're expanding. So, and we're going to be kind of looking at running guides to cephalopod behavior globally. And that's a really cool project. I think, again, just, it's not specifically it's marine science rather than environmental necessarily, but yeah.
Do they have a site or a page? Do you know?
Yeah, I'd probably send you the link, Todd. It's an academic site. trying to remember what it's actually called now, but I'll have to send you the
We'll,
link.
yeah, we'll put it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I
So they have a
it.
Facebook page.
Yeah, I see their
Cephalopod
Facebook
System Science
page.
Project.
We'll include it in
Yeah,
the show
yeah.
notes for anyone interested in checking it out. We'll have all
Cool.
of their links in the show notes. So no problem. Yeah,
Cool.
I'm curious to check this out. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, it's a cool project. So, and I think to some extent, you know, what running projects like that is almost better than partnering with an organization as a sort of, you know, we'll get involved with organizations and run projects, and that, you know, provide our audience with participation as well, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we recently we had what was her name?
Francesca. Yeah,
Francesca from Love the Oceans. They're doing what made me think of it was we were talking about environmental tourism. So she opened up a place down in Mozambique. Trying to convert them over to ecotourism from unsustainable fishing habits. And I just think there's so much work in that area to be done across the world, you know.
Yeah, I think, you know, I absolutely, and I think divers and underwater photography. I mean, I think so. Kind of going back to the environmental ethic, really, my goal as an underwater photographer is to basically to try and bring what fascinates me about the oceans and the beauty of the oceans and the majesty of the ocean and the challenges that the oceans face to an audience that can't otherwise or wouldn't otherwise see it. So you know, by trying to use the skills that I have to try and produce images that would captivate people and encourage people to discover more about the world's oceans. And that's kind of, I think, as underwater photographers, that's something we can all do. You don't have to be an organization, you don't have to be, but, you know, and you know, we should take pictures of the bad stuff too. You know, it's not not all happiness and light out there.
Sure.
We should capture, and you know, there's some very, very compelling imagery that people are using that show the challenges of things like unsustainable fishing practices, for example.
Now, a friend of ours, Stephen Frink, he has a thing for Elkhorn Coral, and he's been showing a lot of the, you know, collapse of a lot of the coral, where they're just a lot of dead coral, and then he'll find places where it's thriving to show people the difference, because a lot of people don't understand. You know, they'll see white coral and they'll be like, oh, that's really pretty. Well, it's a little pretty, but then you realize how tragic it is because it's, you know, the life has left the coral, right? So is there any thing, I know that you mentioned your passion for sharks and you know, the environmental impact there. Are there any types of coral that you like to try to bring attention to?
I think the staghorn is the obvious one, you know, in Florida, because that's one that's really well documented. You know, we're seeing coral diebacks globally. I was in the Barrier Reef in 2018, and I have to say, you know, that was after the second bleaching episode. There was a lot of dead coral around, but actually the good news is there was quite a lot of stuff growing as well. So you know, there was pros and cons to it. But you know, I don't have a species, but I think one of the, again, going back to this idea, what we can do and what Stephen's done really well, and is, you know, he's got wonderful pictures of these coral gardens pre their demise, and then he's got pictures, so he's got before and after, and I think that's something as photographers, you know, documenting these types of things. Stephen, obviously being a Keys resident for a long time, you know, has enabled him to kind of capture that. And I think that's something that as photographers is something we could really, and something we probably should do more. So even if we, you know, we should capture those documenting shots, we should capture shots of the reefs as they are now, because in 20 years' time, they may not be like that. And that shows people that there's a need to protect and preserve.
Now, for, you know, to continue on with the conservation talk for a little bit, when we first started our conversation, you told us how you moved up from South Africa to the UK, and you know, you mentioned the Red Sea back in the, I think it was in the
early 90s.
Early 90s.
Early 90s,
yeah. So have you been back there recently, and what kind of difference have you noticed? Because I would imagine the the Red Sea is a good place to judge, because it doesn't, from my understanding, it doesn't get as much traffic as say Indonesia and the Caribbean.
Yeah, I don't know. You see, I think the Red Sea did get very busy, because remember, particularly the Egyptian Red Sea is a relatively small area.
Yeah.
So it did actually get really busy. So it is quite an interesting case study, because early 90s there wasn't many people going. It was quiet. There was a big boom in tourism there in the what would have been sort of late 90s through into the 2000s and 2010s, and it was a very, very steep exponential curve in the number of tourism and the amount of tourism, and it was a problem. The Arab Spring and the results of the Arab Spring, of course, knocked all that on the head. And so tourism numbers dropped off again. And practically what the difference is, when you're diving there, and I mean, I think last time I was there was 2017, 2018, is previously that when the critters would stick their heads out of the hole and a group would come past, they'd duck back in, and then they'd start sticking their head out, and then the group would come past, and they never really got out the hole. Whereas now they're out, because they're not seeing anybody, and that's the difference. Interestingly, the coral in the Red Sea is in really good condition. I mean, it's not been, touch wood, there's been no bleaching. It's not a wonderfully managed sea. The resources are pretty scarce in Egypt. They don't have a whole amount of resource, but it's relatively, it is pretty healthy, I have to say. It's a bit of a success story. And I think it's an interesting one to observe, because certainly, for example, if we were to take pictures over 20 years there, I think we'd probably find that things like the corals actually probably not suffered a great deal, which would be an interesting comparison. Certainly like Dubilay's early stuff in the late 70s. You compare pictures that he captured then to now. Yeah, I mean, it's okay. And that's good news, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
An unintended benefit of political unrest.
Yeah. Well, certainly. I mean, again, but there's a human cost to it, of course, which we shouldn't underestimate. There are people that have really suffered and are really suffering, financially, and that's all sorts of other hardships associated with that. So, but yes, it has certainly created a decline in the tourism numbers. So, yeah.
And I think,
have you seen? Sorry, Todd.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say is Dalton, go.
I was just going to ask if just across the world in general, because I know that you've been diving for a while. Have you noticed big changes? Where have your biggce where have you noticed your biggest changes? And
so I think, and again, obviously it's a hobby horse of mine. So, but once upon a time, seeing sharks on a reef was normal.
Yeah.
Right.
Most dives you saw sharks on a reef. They were part of the ecosystem. They were, if you were diving on a coral reef, you expected at some point to see a shark, and that's simply not the case anymore. When we see sharks, we get very happy and very overjoyed about it because we've seen a shark. Certainly, when I started spearfishing in the 80s, the sharks used to come and take the catch quite regularly. People used to let them take it, of course, because that was kind of like, that's all it was, and they were always around. There were always sharks in the water, and that's simply not the case anymore. And that to me is I've always sort of based that as a kind of the apex predator and then working down. And if the apex predators are reducing in such numbers, that can't be good for the rest of the ecosystem. So I think they're a good barometer possibly of the sea's health.
On WetPixel, do you guys have any type of environmental section, or have you guys thought about adding an environmental section?
There's an environmental forum for sure, there's discussion on there about the marine environment, and obviously an opportunity for people to post about projects and post about issues of concern for sure.
That's great.
And, we've got involved in various campaigns over the years for all sorts of different things, and we'll continue to do so for sure. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Shall we do the dive reef, Dalton? What do you think?
Absolutely. So did Todd tell you about our dive
I
brief?
did not.
No.
Why don't you tell Adam what we got him in for?
Okay, so toward the end of all of our interviews, we call it the dive brief. It's 5 rapid fire questions that you just give a quick answer. For example, like the first question is, what's your favorite dive snack?
Oh. Okay. Are we going now?
And go.
And
All right, okay.
we'll go now.
What's my favorite dive snack? Chocolate.
Good. Go ahead, Todd.
Other than your camera and your housing, what is your favorite piece of dive gear?
My rebreather.
Nice. So if you could choose somewhere to dive that you haven't already been, where would that be?
Galapagos.
Nice.
If you, what is your favorite post-dive drink? It doesn't have to be
two
alcohol.
answers. There are two answers.
All right.
So the first answer would be I'm an addict. I'm a Diet Coke addict, so that would be number one. So it's more likely. But if I was in an ideal world, it would be a cold Corona, ice cold with lime, please.
Nice. So I think we already know the answer to this, but your favorite sea animal?
Well, yeah, sharks. Yeah.
Sharks. Yeah.
Yeah.
The most frustrating thing about diving is
Gearing up.
Nice.
Good answer.
Well,
I like it.
That wraps up our dive brief.
That's it. You
for
survived.
Adam.
Good answers, Adam. I like it.
Nice. And all good ones. I think I could be down with all of those.
Yes,
for sure.
yeah.
If you could miraculously go from land to being in the water with your gear on, camera in your hand, it would make life so much easier. Just take a pill and it would happen.
Right.
It'd be great.
Exactly.
Now, just a couple more questions before we try to close this out. You had mentioned your rebreather. Do you travel with your rebreather, or do you just use that locally?
Mostly locally, unless there's a specific need for it. I mean, they're a pain in the arse to travel with.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can say that. They're a pain
Yes,
to travel
you
with. And often, getting hold of the gear that you need, the softener lime and the oxygen, all the other bits and pieces you need, often precludes them. So if there's a need, sure, but probably I travel rarely with it. Yeah.
Do you do? You also mentioned you started off doing spearfishing. Do you do much free diving still, or not really?
Yeah. So the Mexican stuff is all free diving. I do free dive. I enjoy free diving. I like free diving very much. I think the UK is challenging for you free diving just because it's cold and it's not.
Yeah.
But when I get the opportunity to free dive, I enjoy it very much. Yeah.
Okay. Well, just to go back to the spearfishing thing, I used to spearfish a lot in Florida, and I know there's always been a little controversy between. In my opinion, I have to stick with the traditional, but you're not truly spearfishing unless you're free diving.
Yeah, well, I've only ever spearfished holding my breath. Yeah, I've never. Yeah. So in South Africa, you weren't allowed to scuba and spearfish.
Yeah. So in Florida, you're allowed to, and even here in California, you're allowed to spearfish on scuba. Yeah. And personally, I think that's cheating.
Yeah,
I'm sure I'll get some controversy about that. But.
Yeah, I think you might. I mean, I each to their own. Let's not tell other people how to do things. But personally, I would never choose to spearfish on scuba. I have to say I don't spearfish anymore either. I spearfish with a camera. So, I try, and I'm not perfect, but I try not to eat fish. So which is really hard because I really like eating fish, but I'm more worried about their numbers than not. But again, that's my decision. It's not anyone else's decision.
I wish I could get there. I wish I could get to that.
I'm telling you guys, stone crab, it's sustainable. You're just taking the claw and throwing it back. They grow a new one. You can eat stone crab conscience free.
There you go.
That's Todd's favorite right there.
That's my favorite thing to eat is stone crab. So I find it. I'm just finding an excuse for it. That's all.
double bonus.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks so much, Adam, for your time. You've been an awesome guest. We're huge fans of yours and the site. Before we go, why don't you tell everyone where they can find more about WetPixel and then also your own site as well.
So WetPixel is very straightforward. Is wetpixel.com. I would just stick into Google, you'll find it. But my own site, my imaging site is Hanlon Photography, Hanlon-photography.com. But also, please, go onto YouTube, WetPixel Live, really cool resource if you're interested in underwater image making. So, yeah, good. Hopefully, good place to go and visit.
And also, if we get any listeners across the pond, you have a dive shop as well. Do you want to?
Yeah, I have. Well, not so shop. I have a dive centre based in a freshwater quarry in the north of England, limestone quarry. So it's really clear.
Okay, and the name of
it's an odd name. It's called Capenray, Capernwray.
Awesome.
And it's a Norse name, I think. Anyway, and it's one of those weird places in that if you live in the UK and you dive in the UK, you know about it, but the rest of the world hasn't a clue. So, but yeah. And
does it have an associated website, .eu or anything like that?
Yeah, it's www.dive-school.co.uk.
Awesome.
Well, the secret is out. You're trying to keep it a secret all these years. Well, now we're going to post it everywhere. Oh,
that's great.
Wait. On that note, tell us about your biggest fans, which are your dogs. So what kind of dogs do you got?
We have everything from a Chihuahua to a Belgian Shepherd cross collie. So,
wow.
So we have 4 of them. So
nice.
And so they're all sizes from tiny to pretty big. So, but we live right on the beach. So they
do they love the water?
They love it, yeah. Well, varying degrees, to be fair. So Chihuahua's not skin on the water, no, but the others to varying degrees like it. But I mean, they love the beach. They just hang out on the beach all day. Very happy, really. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, if we ever make it over to the UK, we'll definitely trouble you for a dive.
That'd be great. I would really like that. And conversely, when I'm sure at some point I'll be over in the States, and we'll hook up.
Absolutely.
And see if we can get together and go diving. Take some pictures.
We'll definitely look at your upcoming trips in 2021 and
cool.
See if we can
join you guys
for a trip. I think that'd be fantastic.
Let's set a goal to try to meet up in person in less than 6 years. Let's see if we can make that happen.
That sounds like unlike my work history. It sounds like a good one. Sounds excellent.
Right on. Awesome.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Adam. We really appreciate your time. It was so great to meet you, and thanks for doing this.
Yeah, it was fantastic. We really appreciate it.
And take care. Have a good day.
Yeah.
You too.
You guys have a good night. Cheers.
Take care, bud.
Bye, guys.
Bye.